we'll be talking about different ways to handle battle mechanics in the game. We'll be looking specifically at 3 types: dice-based battle mechanics, card-based battle mechanics, and sort of numerical-based mechanics that simply resolve themselves without any luck involved. So for dice mechanics, a few weeks ago we looked at Summoner Wars. In that game, you simply look at the number that indicates the unit's power, and you roll a number of dice equal to that number. For every result of 3 or higher, that's a hit, which applies a wound to the enemy unit. Pocket battle is relatively similar, pretty straightforward. For every die result shown on the unit, that would be these sort of dice here, for every result shown, that results in a hit. So if you're attacking with sort of a squad of just these 2 units, that's a hit on everything of 3, 4, and 5, with 2 hits on 4s and 5s. We'll probably look at pocket battles in a future episode. But that's another very simple mechanic. And these are just different ways of getting the same thing. Basically, the dice mechanic, the advantage is it's very non-deterministic. Dice are cool because it could always change. A game could always change on the die roll, and there's never a point when you're out because you could always have a hot streak in the game and come back through a series of good rolls, get some good hits in, and get right back in. You can't plan, no plan is perfect. With dice mechanics, you can't be sure that a plan is going to go off without a hitch because you don't know exactly what you're going in with. You know what you're rolling, but you don't know what the die results will be.
And though, of course, there's always if one person benefits off of the randomness of the die, one person necessarily gets hurt by it. And there's just as many times as it is thrilling to be on the good end of a streak of good rolls, it's just as frustrating to be on the bad end of somebody who you thought was out, essentially beating you over and over again. For more of a less deterministic look on the dice, we have Tannhäuser here, a game where players roll dice based on a number of dice equal to their relevant statistic in that given. And depending on what kind of thing you're trying to do, the two players who are competing will roll different numbers of dice based on their character. So one person might be rolling 6 10-sided dice in Tannhäuser. Yeah. 6 10-sided dice, as opposed to their opponent maybe only rolling 3. So while there's still an element of randomness in the dice rolling, it's certainly a lot more. You can certainly predict the outcome to a greater degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is a little bit less deterministic, more deterministic. So in contrast dice mechanics with a card-based battle system. Cards are actually my preferred way of doing battle. I really like card-based mechanics. One of my favorite games of all time uses cards. And so, for instance, the StarCraft board game. I don't know if a lot of you played it. It's a lot of fun, and all the battles are determined by the cards you have. So the cool thing about cards compared to dice is you know exactly what you're going in with. You don't know what your opponent has, but you know exactly what you have. Your cards aren't going to change on you as you're flipping them over, which is something I really like. You still have luck in terms of when you draw what, in terms of how good your draws are, but the luck is sort of front-loaded. You know exactly, you know if you're in a good position or a bad position, and you know how to sort of play accordingly. You can react to what you've drawn. Whereas with dice, you have a general sense of how well you're doing, but no battle is set before it happens. Whereas with cards, you have a little more certainty going into it. You kind of know where you stand, which I like. Another game which we'll definitely look at in the future is Epic Duels. This little known game that's out of print now, published by Hasbro in 2002, I believe. And with Epic Duels, it's a card-based mechanic. You have attack and defense values on all the combat cards, and you're constantly comparing them to do damage. And that's a game where really you benefit from knowing what your opponent has in their arsenal, and you can sort of guess what they have in their hand, but there's always that element of bluffing involved.
Right. And you see a similar thing we have Kung Fu Fighting out here, a game wherein you are a martial arts master in a Kung Fu, in the real life equivalent of a Kung Fu movie. Mm-hmm. And you have a handful of different kind of punches and kicks and modifiers those punches and kicks, and you have a stance in play that modifies it further. Your opponents have stances in play that modify your attacks and their own attacks. It's much like you were saying. You have more information about what you're going into the fight with. And while nothing is for certain, you can certainly, you have a little bit more of a way of planning. In fact, you can almost see it's almost kind of a gradient of determinism going across the table here. With dice, you have a lot of it is in flux, and with cards, you at least know what you're going into. We're going into the fight with. But with these more numerical games over here, you know essentially everything that is on the board.
It's open information. Yeah.
Right. And this is in these two games. Like if you like card-based mechanics the best, I like numerical-based mechanics the best. Like I have it's probably no coincidence that the two games over here are two of the games that I enjoy playing the most. We just talked about Small World here. And Small World, as we mentioned, is a game that is all about like whoever's army is bigger is the army that wins. You know exactly how many tiles it takes to take exactly how many places. It's a very easy algorithm too. You can essentially just count how many things are on a tile, add 2 to that, and that's how many you need to win. And Neuroshima Hex is a similar game. We have a lid in our backdrop here, but this is in Neuroshima Hex. You control a faction in some sort of post-apocalyptic Earth, and you play with these little hexagonal tiles on a big hexagonal board, and it's all about where you want to place your units, whether they're firing in melee or range, and each one of these units has a number of hit points that it says on the tile. It has a damage output that it says on the tile. It says its order of activation, its initiative order on the tile, and everybody's hand is public, everybody's discard pile is public, everybody has all the information, more or less. Like and the distribution of what tiles are in what people's factions is also well known. It is a game where essentially the only thing that you don't know is when people are going to pull what.
And I think, to make another case for card-based mechanics, I think that's what I really like about the cards is that you get the element of bluffing. So you get a certain degree of certainty, but then from there you have to sort of infer the rest. You have to decide, based on your opponent's plays, what they're holding. You have to figure out, well, if he's being, this aggressive, he must have X. If he's still waiting to draw, if he's really focusing on drawing cards, he must be, sort of searching for Y. So you can sort of infer things. You know maybe the distribution of the cards beforehand. But you don't know exactly what he has, and there's sort of a little bit more bluffing and a little bit more, back and forth. It's outside of this board.
Right. There's a little bit more guesswork.
Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say
that's not guesswork. It's more like to borrow a phrase from all of my teachers ever, an educated guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit more reading to it. There's an element of sort of seeing plays and making conclusions from them, and I really enjoyed that. So I think that really wraps up different battle mechanics. You have dice-based, card-based, and numeric, I would say.
Yeah, numeric was a good term for it.
And they, like we said, go from the sort of most luck-based and sort of most up in the air to the most determined and sort of the most clear, and everyone can just calculate what's going to happen before it happens.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up.